One of the key points that most postmodern theorists can agree on is that the term itself is difficult to give one key definition. As John Hills notes, that wide range of economic, social and cultural phenomena, with the result that many commentators on postmodernism are not necessarily referring to or focusing upon the same things. To be more specific in regards to the postmodern condition, Christopher Butler describes this as one in which the global condition of societies is seen not as determined by traditional economic or political frameworks, but as the state of culture. The postmodern condition film has been theorised to appear in a number of ways. It may be the film itself is narratively about this postmodern condition, or it may be postmodern in the way it is constructed, and of course it could be both of these factors. Some of the elements found in films that are considered to be postmodern are elaborated upon by Selleck Norman, who labelled some of the key characteristics to include intertextuality, pastiche, parody, and episodic/interrupted or digressive narrative structure, as well as many others. Many of these conventions revolve around the film breaking the expectations of cinema, in turn making the film to appear to be postmodern rather than modern. This is why I've chosen to look at the theory for a textual analysis of the film 500 Days of Summer. 500 Days of Summer is a romantic comedy which follows the story of Tom, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and his sporadic relationship with his girlfriend, Summer, played by Zooey Deschanel. The film's narrative jumps randomly between a varying number of days, from day 1 being the day that they met, to day 500 being the day that Tom moves on after his final chance encounter with Summer. We are shown the highs and lows of the relationship between the two, with the narrative being focused on Tom and his inability to let Summer go. The narrative itself is a conglomeration of classic Hollywood romantic comedy styles, those being the radical rom-com of the 60s and 70s such as Annie Hall, and the more Efron-esque types of rom-com of the 80s like When Harry Met Sally and Sleepless in Seattle. Evans and DeLeo cite Krutik and Neal and describe that the new romantic comedies are self-consciously establishing a link with their own tradition, insisting on the validity of its conventions and suggesting an unbroken line of continuity with the filmic and literary history of the genre. This intertextuality weaves itself not only in the film's narrative but also in the two main characters. The characters of Summer and Tom have an urge to live out their lives as if they were living through a past genre of romantic comedy. Tom living the Efron-esque, and Summer living the radical style. Tom is clearly the more proactive one in a relationship, where Summer seems to be neither here nor there about them most of the time. And as soon as Tom's 80s rom-com begins to have cracks, his entire personality begins to collapse on what it once was. Summer, towards the beginning of the film, does not want to enter the idea of living her life in the way that Tom dreams of, and as she slowly begins to be entrapped in Tom's own romantic comedy, she is quickly reminded of her own self after a viewing of one of the most famously radical rom-coms in memory, The Graduate. A film that earlier on in the narrative is shown to have an impact in Tom's early life, being one of the factors that gives him the attitude he has for romance in his adult life due to the clear misreading of the film's ending on his part.
This belief stemmed from early exposure to sad British pop music and a total misreading of the movie The Graduate.
Once Summer sees the ending, she takes action, immediately cutting off the relationship for good after witnessing the film's final shot, a shot that reminds her of her radical rom-com personality. Summer and Tom can only make decisions based upon their relationship with past texts that they both perceive to be part of their reality, thus both retreating into nostalgia for comfort and advice. The entire film is structured in such a way to reveal Tom's state of mind to the viewer. The narrative is mostly told in a clear chronological order, but at times can jump huge leaps back and forth in time. Despite the film being simple to follow narratively, the use of a broken up narrative line appears here to serve no real purpose other than to break the cinematic conventions, such as the convention noted by Connor to be classical Hollywood cinema is said to utilise a traditional model of linear narrative mode of casual links. Furthermore, we are shown how Tom perceives his relationship with Summer in reference to his own nostalgia for romantic films of yesteryear, yet nowhere else is this made clearer than in the film's expectations versus reality scene, placed towards the closing act of the film. It is already made clear from the very beginning of moments of the film how much Tom craves a classical romance, as the film narrator tells us,
The boy, Tom Hanson of Margate, New Jersey, grew up believing that he'd never truly be happy until the day he met the one.
In the scene, we see the film screen split down the middle of the frame as two different variations of the same scene begin to play out simultaneously. One in which Tom gets his Efron-esque ending of getting back with Summer, and the other where he is negated of such a dream and she moves on to be with another partner, the latter being the reality he has to face. This splitting of the frame is noted to be an inherently postmodern technique by Keith Brooker. The split frame technique collapses the temporality of Einsteinian montage into simultaneously spatiality, verifying the suggestion by Jameson that the imagination of postmodernist culture is primarily spatial rather than temporal. The film is presenting this lust for nostalgia as Tom losing himself, losing his meaning as the number of days get higher, with the end of the scene transitioning into a drawing of the frame as it slowly vanishes into nothing. Following on from the intertextuality of the film discussed previously connects us to one of the most prominent postmodern themes that the film displays not only through its aesthetic choices, but also within the narrative themes itself. This is the obsession with the past through parody. Frederick Jameson refers to this condition as pastiche. He describes the term when he states, "Pastiche, like parody, the imitation of a peculiar or unique style in a world in which stylistic innovation is no longer possible. All that is left is to imitate dead styles." Despite the film not being considered a parody of the genre, it certainly parodies both our culture and other filmmaking techniques throughout the runtime. Tom works at a greeting card company, being tasked to come up with new and creative cards for the ever-increasing amount of public holidays, one being commented on as Other Mother's Day, meant in a way to mock our current culture and the way we value the commodification of human relationships. What should be something that society celebrates personally is reduced to a way for companies to make money and yet another commodity for humans to take in.
It's these cards, and the movies and the pop songs, they're to blame for all the lies and the heartache, everything. And we're responsible. I'm responsible. I think we do a bad thing here. People should be able to say how they feel, how they really feel, not, some words that some strangers put in their mouths, words like love.
Jameson further notes that the 1950s are one of the heaviest periods for films to reference due to the easy stereotypes that media has attributed to the decade. The beginning of the film presents various signifiers to the audience that would suggest that what they are seeing is that of the 1950s. For example, the aspect ratio is changed to that of one you'd expect to see in an old television set, along with the image being made to be black and white. This presentation of classic America is something that Hill notes to be a common trait of the postmodern film. As he claims, these films conform to conventional American values and celebrate past genres and past conventions with often Christillian perfection, but with no comment. A more egregious example of pastiche within the film comes when it quite literally parodies either specific films or waves of cinema as shown when Tom visits the movie theatre, as well as in other scenes placed throughout the runtime. The film presents some short, direct parodies of what seems to be the films of director Ingmar Bergman, as well as clear replica of the interview scenes from the previously mentioned When Harry Met Sally. We are never told that either Tom or Summer have any distinct interest in films, especially the ones being parodied, so the inclusion in the film seems to be aiming for parody. As per what Hill said, the film is making no comment other than to reference, a theme which is carried through into the film's other aesthetical elements. 500 Days of Summer visually pops. The film rarely stops to have a moment of reprise with constant use of pop music and always trying something creative with the frame. Jameson has noted that the nostalgia film plays into the ways we look back at our history, quoting, "The formal apparatus of nostalgia films has trained us to consume the past in the form of glossy images." These glossy images have come up previously in this essay, but Jameson could also be referring to another element of a film's production, that being the soundtrack.
You've good taste in music.
You like the Smiths?
Yeah.
Look I've had can make a good man turn bad. So please put that in the boxcar waiting outside the family store. Oh yeah, you make my dreams true.
The film's soundtrack, much like Tom himself, is calling back to the past. Music from 80s band The Smiths and the Pixies accompanying most of the film's first half, usually Tom's happiest points in the narrative, most explicitly in a musical dance number done to an 80s pop classic fittingly titled You Make My Dreams Come True. During the film's prologue, it is also noted that Tom listened to the same music as when he was younger, much like in the way he discovered his romantic comedies, once again further showing us this postmodern condition that Tom is facing. It is clear that 500 Days of Summer can be labelled as a postmodern film, and furthermore, as shown in this analysis, it represents the postmodern condition as something for society to fear. The film's aesthetic, reliance on both pastiche as well as intertextuality, all play a part in showing us that the postmodern condition in our culture is something to fear, as Tom is a hugely flawed character who but could not fully develop due to his own entrapment and his nostalgia. Finally, the film could be argued to have a hopeful ending, as after Tom's life with Summer is over, he bumps into a new potential romantic partner, aptly named Autumn. Yet the real final moment of the film comes after the scene ends, when the day counter resets from 500 back down to 1. If we are to see the film as presenting the postmodern condition as the analysis has shown as a loss of meaning, then here we can see Tom does not grow as a character, he simply is put back where he began,